Mornings in Asheville are usually quiet. I've grown used to the thin light sliding through my kitchen window, the wind whispering through the old maples, and the smell of weak coffee dripping from my ancient machine. This old apartment complex hasn't changed much in decades. But that morning, something slipped into the stillness, so faint, so fragile, that I stopped what I was doing. At first, I thought it was just dry leaves skittering down the alley behind the building. Then it came again, uneven, drawn out, like a stifled moan caught in a small throat. I stood still, my heart quickening, and listened. It wasn't the feral cats I'd learned to ignore, nor the squeals of children playing in the courtyard. It was weaker, more urgent, a broken breath, thin as a thread about to snap. I pulled my old wool sweater tight around me and started down the cold iron stairs to the back alley. The smell of damp trash in the morning mist made me shiver. My shoes tapped softly on the wet cement. That sound came again, clearer now, as if it were calling straight into my chest. I turned the corner by the dented garbage bin, and my heart clenched. A puppy, a Doberman, not more than a month old, lay curled into itself, trembling, eyes wet. So small I could have cupped it in both hands. Its black and tan fur was matted with grime and something hard and dry. Its ribs stood out like tiny sticks. It didn't bark. It didn't whimper. It just breathed, thin, flickering breaths like a candle about to go out. I dropped to my knees, frozen. For a moment I could only look into its eyes, wild and bewildered, yet resigned, as if hope had slipped away. My throat tightened. My hand shook as I reached out. "Oh, Lord, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Grandma's here. Don't give up." It blinked slowly, so faint I couldn't tell if it was weakness or recognition that someone was finally there. Its tiny chest still rose and fell, unevenly. I felt my own tears fall, soaking into its filthy coat. In that moment, I wasn't just an old woman stepping out to toss the morning trash. I was standing at the edge of a life, hanging by a thread. And I knew, if I turned away now, silence would swallow it whole. I slid both hands under its tiny body. It was colder than the winter air, a sharp chill biting into my palms like ice. I pressed it to my chest, feeling my own heartbeat seep through my sweater. It still breathed, faint, but there. "You're not garbage," I murmured into its ear, my voice trembling. "You're the reason I still know I'm alive." The alley stayed quiet, just my heartbeat mixing with its frail breaths. I didn't think. I didn't weigh the cost. I stood up, clutching it as if it were the only thing left that mattered. Climbing back up the stairs, I felt the truth. The ordinary morning was over. I didn't know what waited ahead, or if it would survive the day. But I knew one thing. I would not leave it behind. I pushed open my apartment door, the cold air rushing in with the small, shivering body. I set it gently on an old towel. Its eyes opened a slit, cloudy but still with a spark. That spark pierced straight into my heart. I whispered again, almost a prayer. "Grandma's here. You're not alone anymore. I didn't realize then. That moment would change the rest of my life." My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 67 years old. People around here call me the old widow at the end of this worn-out apartment row. I don't blame them. After my husband's sudden heart attack, there hasn't been much to say about me, except one word: silence. My apartment is small, its yellow walls stained with time. In the corner still stands the old organ my husband used to play at night. It's buried under a thick coat of dust heavy enough to see. I haven't touched a single key since the day he left. For me, sound became a wound. Silence, cold as it is, at least doesn't make my heart bleed anymore. Every morning, I brew a weak cup of coffee and sit behind the thin curtain, looking out. Across the street, neighbors chatter. Children ride their bikes in circles. I stay quiet, like the old rocking chair on my porch, still there, but unnoticed. So when I held that tiny life in my arms this morning, something strange happened. My heart, locked shut for so long, stirred. Not with the old pain, but with something else, like a call back to life. I looked down at her. A baby Doberman, light as a pillow. She whimpered softly, her eyes straining to hold on to the light. My fingers trembled as I stroked her matted fur, feeling each bone under the skin. I had never been this close to the raw fragility of life. A question echoed in my mind. Simple, but sharp. Who could do this? Abandon something so small, leaving it to fight hunger and cold alone in a filthy alley. I felt anger. But more than that, shame. For all the times I had heard distant cries and chosen silence. I pulled her closer. "You're not garbage," I whispered, my lips shaking. "You're the reason I still know I'm alive." Crossing my doorway, I knew I was breaking my own patterns. I had never owned a dog, never imagined being responsible for another life again. But those eyes had fastened themselves to me, a plea that wouldn't let me turn away. I grabbed an old towel and spread it on the chair by the heater. I lay her down, fumbling for ways to warm her. Her body was so cold. I took my own sweater and draped it over her, then sat beside her, keeping my hand on her chest to be sure the heartbeat was still there. In that moment, memories rushed back. Nights spent at my husband's bedside, watching his heartbeat on a monitor. The helplessness as the numbers slowed, until the silent straight line appeared. Today, my hand rested on another fragile chest, and I made myself a promise. This time, I would not let go. I heard the thin breath clearly now, each rise and fall like a prayer. "Don't leave." And in my silence, I answered, "I'm here. You're not alone." The room, once ruled by absence, now carried a new sound. Weak, broken, but real. Her breathing. And for the first time in 2 years, silence was no longer the master of my home. I don't know how I'll manage. I have no experience, no plan, no idea if she'll survive tomorrow. But one thing I know for sure. Today, she will not die in the dark. I sat there, holding that small body, watching the morning light slide through the curtain. And for the first time in a very long while, I heard myself whisper, like a promise to life itself, "Stay. I'll learn how to live again with you." I laid her on an old cotton towel by the heater. Her little body trembled, tiny spasms rippling through her as if every strand of muscle was fighting to hold on to life. I couldn't remember the last time I had shaken from fear, yet now my hands would not stop trembling as they touched this fragile frame. I called the vet clinic at the end of the street. My voice was so hoarse and urgent that the nurse had to repeat my name twice before she understood me. She told me, "Keep her warm, give her a little warm diluted milk, and use a small syringe." "Drop by drop," she stressed. "1 drop, 1 beat. Don't rush." I tore through my cupboards and found a bottle of milk, a glass cup, and an old syringe left from my husband's medications. I poured, warmed it, and the soft smell drifted through a room that had smelled of nothing but dampness for years. I drew in a deep breath, as if that scent was lifting me along with her. I sat down and lifted her head gently. Her eyes were half shut, dull, as if she were ready to let go. I held the syringe to her lips, 1 drop. No response. I bit my lip. My heart clenched. Another drop. Still nothing. Tears spilled down my face. I thought of the day the hospital called to tell me my husband was gone. That helplessness, I'd thought I had buried it, rose up again, fierce and raw. Then, that tiny tongue flicked, a weak lick, but real. My breath caught. Another drop, and she swallowed. Her breathing shifted. I couldn't hold it back. I cried like a child. Stay with me, Hope. Please, don't leave me too. I had never spoken that name before. But as the sound left my mouth, I knew it was right. I named her Hope. I went on, drop by drop, slow and patient. Each swallow felt like a miracle. I had never believed in miracles, but in that moment I did, because I was watching a small life choose to return from the edge. When the syringe was empty, Hope's breathing had steadied a little. Still weak, but stronger than when I found her. I wrapped another layer of my sweater around her and pressed my hand to her chest. The tiny heartbeat was still there, fast, uneven, but persistent. I heard it the way I'd heard my own heart after my husband died, staggering, nearly broken, but refusing to stop. I sat there with tears still wet on my face. The room that had been so cold now held two heartbeats, one old, one new, blending into a strange kind of music. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt I wasn't completely alone. I whispered, a promise to her, but also to myself. I won't let you go in silence. If you want to live, I'll fight with you. Hope trembled, her ears giving the smallest twitch as if she understood. I looked down, my heart tightening. A tear slid from my cheek onto the towel, soaking in right beside her. And I knew the thread between us had been tied. Nothing could undo it now. I leaned back in the chair, eyes closed, still keeping my hand on her chest. I listened to her tiny breaths grow steadier, no longer so ragged. I exhaled. The apartment was silent, but no longer empty. It carried the sound of life. Tonight I will not sleep. I don't dare. But for the first time in a long while, I am afraid of losing something, and that fear, strange as it is, makes me feel alive again. That first night with Hope was a trial. I spread an old blanket beside the armchair, near where the heater gave off a faint warmth, and lay her down. But I couldn't take my eyes off her. Every breath she drew felt like a test for my own heart. Each pause, a little longer than it should be, made me jolt upright, leaning close, trembling as I searched for a heartbeat. I remembered the last nights by my husband's hospital bed, the way I stared at the monitor, begging for each beat as the line slowed. That same helplessness was back, but this time it was wrapped in a life no heavier than a pillow. I didn't sleep. I sat in the chair with my hand resting on Hope's chest, making sure she was still here. The night crawled by, broken only by the ticking clock and her uneven breaths. In the dark, I whispered like a lullaby. I'm here. You're not alone. By morning, my eyes burned, but when I saw Hope still breathing, I smiled. Just a small smile, but it was real. On the second day, I tried giving her more milk. This time, her tongue flicked quicker, her swallow a little stronger. Still weak, but better. With each drop she managed, my own heart grew warmer. On the third day, something happened that stopped me cold. Hope lifted her head and looked straight into my eyes. Those dark eyes, clouded with exhaustion, carried a flicker of light. A silent question pierced through me. Will you leave me too? I broke down, gathering her into my arms. No, I will never leave you. Never. From that day on, my apartment was no longer swallowed in silence. There were small sounds now. The breath, the rustle of movement, even the faint whimper when Hope tried to shift positions. To anyone else, they would be nothing. To me, they were music. I began to notice how much I was changing. Instead of sitting for hours in my rocking chair, staring out at the street, I found myself on the floor, watching every small movement. I counted each drop of milk, listened to every breath, as if these tiny rituals could stretch her life one more day. But fear was still there. Whenever Hope lay still too long, panic jolted through me. Some nights, I bolted upright, my heart pounding, convinced she had stopped breathing. My hands would shake as I bent over her, searching for that tiny heartbeat. And when I found it, relief brought me to tears. I lived on that narrow edge, half hope, half fear. And strangely, it was that fragility that anchored me to life. On the fourth evening, as I sat beside her, rocking her gently, words slipped from me. Words I hadn't spoken in 2 years. You know, since your grandpa passed, I haven't wanted to wake up anymore. But this morning, I waited for the sunrise just to make sure you were still breathing. Hope, of course, didn't answer. She only trembled softly and pressed her tiny face into my palm. Yet in that moment, I felt heard. On the 5th day, she tried to stand. Wobbly, uncertain, her little legs looked too thin to hold her frail body. I held my breath, watching. She toppled once, then again, but she kept trying. And finally she stood, for just a few seconds. I clapped my hands, tears streaming. "Well done, Hope. You're stronger than I believed." In those days, our small apartment became a battlefield for both of us. She fought to live, and I fought to believe in life again. Every drop of milk, every shaky step, every fragile breath, each was carved into my heart as a victory. And in those long, anxious days, I came to a truth. I was no longer afraid of silence itself. I was only afraid of losing the fragile sound of life beside me. On the 6th morning, I did something that even surprised me. I threw open the window I had kept shut for 2 years. Light rushed in, sweeping away the long shadows that had clung to my apartment. The sharp breath of early spring air filled my lungs and reminded me I was still alive. Hope lay on the towel, lifting her head. Her tiny ears perked up, her eyes blinking at the sudden flood of light. I smiled. A real smile, not the forced kind. I turned toward the corner of the room. The organ still stood there, heavy with dust, like a memory I had been too afraid to touch. My husband used to sit there every night, playing gentle tunes to ease me into sleep. Since the day he passed, I hadn't dared touch a single key, for fear the sound would tear me open all over again. But that morning, for reasons I can't explain, I stepped closer. I pulled off the cover. Dust rose, glowing in the sunlight. My fingers trembled as I pressed a key. The note rang sharp, clumsy, but real. I drew a deep breath and pressed another, then another. Hope startled, her little ears twitching, and then, as if something inside her had been stirred, she let out her very first bark. Weak, raspy, but clear. I froze, tears welling up. "Do you hear that, little one?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "Both you and I. We've found our voices again." That bark, mingling with the awkward notes of the organ, filled the small apartment. I had never heard anything more beautiful. It wasn't just a bark. It was a declaration. I am here. I want to live. I kept playing, though my hands shook and the notes stumbled. Hope answered with a small whine, then another bark. We spoke to each other in broken sounds, but no words were needed. I felt my heart open. an empty space deep inside me filling with this strange music we made together. That night, I pulled my chair close to the organ and laid Hope on the blanket beneath it. I played the tune my husband once played. The notes were slow, sad, but familiar. Hope looked up at me, her eyes glistening in the lamplight. She didn't bark this time. She just lay still, breathing evenly, as if listening. And suddenly I heard myself whisper, "I thought I had lost everything, but you've shown me there's still something worth beginning again." The next day, Hope tried to walk, still shaky, still falling more than standing, but after every fall, she pushed herself back up. I felt fear and pride tangled together. I remembered how I had once been like her, knocked flat by loss, then clawing my way back to my feet, simply because there was no other choice but to go on. One time she fell hard and whimpered. I rushed to her side, whispering, "Don't be afraid, Hope. You're allowed to be weak, but stand again. I'll be right here." "Always," she looked at me, her eyes bright as though she understood. Then she tried again, and this time she managed 3 small steps. I laughed and cried at once, clapping my hands like a child. Together, we found our voices again. Mine through music and tears. Hers through barks and stumbling steps. Each passing day, the little apartment that had known only silence grew alive with sound. Scraping paws, poured water, uneven notes, and the laughter of an old woman who thought she had forgotten how. I realized something then. A voice doesn't only live in sound. It lives in the courage to exist. And today, both Hope and I have found ours again. I never imagined the day would come when I'd be walking a puppy around the neighborhood. Usually, I just go to the little grocery store on the corner and come straight back. But with Hope, everything was different. She needed fresh air. She needed sunlight. And maybe I did too. On our first day out, Hope trembled. The moment her tiny paws touched the sidewalk, she pressed herself against my leg. Her eyes darted everywhere. Every small sound made her flinch. I bent down, stroked her head, and whispered, "It's all right, sweetheart. I'm here." When we passed the little park, a group of children playing ball stopped. A blonde girl, about 8 years old, stared at Hope and walked over. "Is she yours, ma'am?" The question caught in my throat. Before I could answer, Hope shuddered and tucked herself completely behind my legs. I reached down to soothe her, then looked up and replied softly, "No, she's ours now. She belongs to everyone who still believes in second chances." The girl smiled and held out her tiny hand. Hope hesitated. Then, as if an invisible thread had been pulled, she took one step forward and gently touched her nose to the little palm. The children let out a small cheer. My eyes grew wet. In the days that followed, I took Hope out more often. Each time, she trembled a little less. The children began calling her name, "Hope! Hope!" And she slowly learned to wag her tail in reply. Adults on the street, who had once only nodded at me out of habit, now stopped to ask about her. An elderly woman in a wheelchair at the end of the block took my hand and said, "This little one brings light, not just to you." This whole neighborhood needs her. I laughed, choked with emotion. Maybe she was right. For the first time in years, I saw my neighbors' faces brighten as we passed by. One evening at sunset, Hope and I sat on an old wooden bench. A boy sat down next to us, gently scratching behind her ear. He asked me, "Why did you name her Hope?" I looked out at the fading light covering the old buildings and answered slowly, "Because she was all out of hope. And so was I. But somehow, we found it in each other." The boy nodded and smiled. Hope rested her head on his lap, eyes closing, breathing steady. In that moment, I knew this little dog hadn't just saved me. She was saving everyone who saw her, reminding them that even in darkness, a small light can shine. News about Hope spread faster than I expected. People retold the story of how I'd found her behind the trash bin. The vet clinic spoke of her as the miracle pup. Sometimes, strangers knocked on my door just to see her, to pet her and smile. I didn't mind. In fact, I was glad. Hope was no longer my little secret. She had become a symbol for the whole community. I sat on my porch, watching children laugh and run around Hope. I heard her name echo through the street, and inside, I whispered, "You see, little one? You're not abandoned anymore. You belong here. And so do I." At night, when I closed the apartment door, I picked Hope up and held her close. Her steady breathing filled my heart like music. I no longer felt alone in the silent apartment. I had a new family, small, unexpected, but real. It was the weekend when my daughter, Sarah, showed up at my door with my 2 grandchildren. It had been so long since we'd sat together without that heavy silence pressing in. Sarah hugged me tight, then bent down to look at Hope. Her eyes lit up as if she'd just witnessed a small miracle. "Oh, Mom, she's beautiful." "I can't believe you're keeping a dog in the house." I smiled softly. "I'm not keeping her. She's keeping me." The 2 little ones rushed forward, their tiny hands reaching out to stroke Hope. At first, she backed away, hesitant. I held my breath, afraid that the memories of being abandoned would make her retreat. But then, something unexpected happened. Hope slowly stepped forward, laid her head in the boy's hand, and closed her eyes. My heart burst inside my chest. Sarah squeezed my hand, her voice trembling. "Mom, you're different. You found yourself again." Her words brought tears to my eyes. I brushed my silver hair back and whispered, "I didn't find myself. She found me." In the days that followed, the apartment, once filled with silence, now overflowed with sound. Children laughing, Hope's paws clicking across the wooden floor. The organ was playing tunes I thought were lost. I sat in my rocking chair, watching it all swirl around me, my heart overflowing with gratitude. One evening, when the apartment was quiet again, I held Hope on my lap. She had grown a little, her breathing steady and warm. I bent down and whispered into her small ear. I thought silence was all I had left. But then I heard you. And you. You saved me. She lifted her head, those deep black eyes gazing at me as if she understood. I broke into tears, not out of sadness, but because of the grace pouring in all at once. I remembered that morning, the dark alley, the filthy trash bin, the breath so faint it almost vanished. If I hadn't walked down those stairs, if I'd turned away like all the times before, I would have missed this chance. Not just the chance to save her, but to save myself. Now I believe one thing. No cry is ever meant to be forgotten. Someone will always hear. And sometimes, that someone is you. I looked up, wanting to send a message to anyone who might be listening to this story. If one day you hear a small cry, don't walk past it. Because while you think you're saving a life that seems insignificant, you may be saving your own. Hope stirred, nestling deeper into my arms. I smiled through my tears. In that moment, the circle closed, from silence to barking, from despair to hope, from a lonely old woman to a whole family. And I knew one thing for sure. I was never alone again. Do you remember the last time you heard a small cry? Maybe it was a puppy on the roadside, a cat shivering in the rain, or just a desperate glance lost in a crowd? Did you bend down? Did you reach out? And now, where is that small life? Still in your arms? Or has it become an unforgettable part of your memory? As I hold hope close, I understand something. Every tiny life we save today doesn't just need us to live. It helps us remember we still have a heart to love. Maybe you felt that too. Maybe right now, as you reach this part of the story, you're remembering the first look of a fragile creature who clung to you as if clinging to life itself. If this story touches you, I want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, have you ever rescued a small life? What changed in you at that moment? Where is that life now? Is it still with you? Your stories will be a light for those who are lost. Thank you for staying with me and Hope until the end of this journey. Every view, every second you've given this video isn't just a number. It's the warmth of a community of hearts that still feel. If you believe no cry should go unheard, click subscribe so together we can keep spreading this compassion. Click that button as a small promise. When someone needs us, we will hear them. And who knows, maybe the next story we tell will be yours.